Good evening and welcome to the Morley Journey. Welcome to our channel. I've been asked to talk a bit about my first impressions of the Philippines. Well, the first thing you notice, which when you get off the plane in the Philippines, it's hot. Coming from England as I do, the Philippines is most of the year hotter than the UK. Occasionally the UK can be as hot or even hotter than the Philippines, but most of the time it's hot. So your first impression of the Philippines is that it's hot. Probably the second impression is that everyone starting at the boys at the end of the air bridge when you get off the plane, everyone's very friendly and saying welcome to the Philippines, and everyone's got a smile, everyone's very friendly. Then I think the third thing you notice is the fact that everyone can speak English. Now, of course, probably if I went into the province, I might find people who couldn't speak English or not speak English so well. But as a generality, in all the cities, and certainly on planes and boats, people are going to speak English. The thing that's surprising about the Philippines, but it's much the same in most of Asia, is the amount of street food. The amount of vendors on the side of the street selling food. You wouldn't see, it's a rarity to see street food in Europe in general, and in particular England, because all the hygiene laws and all the laws preventing it. But street food is a big thing in Asia and in particular in the Philippines. The Philippines, unfortunately, the streets aren't very clean. There's a lot of graffiti. The infrastructure is not very good. You compare it to, say, Taiwan or Singapore, you wouldn't see graffiti there, and the streets are a lot cleaner and the infrastructure is very, very much better. The Philippines is a peculiar mixture of first world and third world. Then I think the other surprising thing about the Philippines is the shopping malls. The Philippines has got a lot of shopping malls, and some of those shopping malls are the biggest shopping malls in the world. Very, very big shopping malls. So that's another surprise. You've got this mixture of first world shopping malls. If you're in an SM or any other shopping mall, you wouldn't know which country in the world you're in. But you come outside the malls and you realise you're back in a third world country. So the Philippines is a very unusual mixture of first and third world. Then of course the other thing which is very noticeable about Cebu, and Manila's the same, and most of the big cities are the same, Davao, is the amount of taxes. Reason there's so many taxes in the Philippines is because car ownership is low, because obviously it's an impoverished country. And along with low car ownership, the other thing which you have got an awful lot of is mopeds and motorbikes, and they are a real hazard. They zip in and out in between the cars, in between the jeepneys. They go up onto the pavement. Some of them have got a whole family of 5 on them. They're a real hazard, and every now and again you see a motorbike that's run into a jeepney, or jeepneys run into a motorbike, and the motorbike always comes off worst. And then of course jeepneys are a real feature of the Philippines, very colourful, and you don't really find jeepneys in many other countries. Of course, the other thing you do find in the Philippines is either pedal cycle or motorbike trikes. And of course you get similar sort of things called tuk-tuks. You get those in, say, like Sri Lanka or Thailand, but basically the trikes are another nearly unique feature to the Philippines. So, and then I think the noise as well. The streets are full of people, there's a lot of noise, there's the noise of the motorbikes, there's the noise of the taxis, there's the noise of the jeepneys, and then you've got the trikes as well. Although you don't tend to see the trikes in city centres, they tend to be more on the edges or suburbs of cities. And The streets are very full of people, especially in the cities. But that, I think, is a feature of most of Asia. And then, of course, the other thing which is very noticeable is everyone in the malls or on the streets is young. Virtually everybody looks as if they're all under 30. Now, I'm sure there are a few people more, but of course, demographics of the Philippines is such that there are not a lot of old people. In the Philippines, you're old at 60, whereas, of course, in Europe, we have a lot more elderly people. We've got a lot more people over 60, but in the third world and countries with high birth rates and not very good mortality rates, you have a big skew to, and half the population could be under the age of 25. So that's another big difference between UK and Europe and the Philippines, is the weighting towards young people. I think the other thing that surprised me about the Philippines is the emphasis on education, and the Philippines put quite a store on education, and you'll see all the children in their school uniforms, and despite the fact they may come from poor families, the children always look very, very smart in their uniforms, and obviously the parents make a big effort to have them looking good and tidy. The food in the Philippines is an unusual mixture. You've got the Filipino food, which has obviously got a bit of a Spanish influence. It's got a bit of an Asian influence. It's got a bit of a Chinese influence, and it definitely has got an American influence, because, of course, the Spanish were thrown out of the Philippines in the late 1890s after America won the Spanish-American War, and then, of course, it was part of the Commonwealth of the Philippines. Was governed by the USA until 1946, July the 12th, 1946, when the Philippines got its independence, which of course is still celebrated with Independence Day. So you get corned beef as a breakfast dish, and that surprised me. And of course, hot dogs and burgers and corned beef were all really American influenced. So you have got this American influence in the Philippines. Having said that, in the cities there's plenty of other restaurants, Italian restaurants, Spanish restaurants, even the very occasional Indian restaurants, but there's not many. Whereas, of course, in England we have tens of thousands of Indian, Pakistani or Bangladeshi restaurants, but they're all called Indian restaurants, although only a small fraction of them are. The other thing that's very noticeable is, if you go into the supermarkets, the food mix is very much different to the food mix of a European or UK supermarket. The fish selection is far better than the fish selection in UK, despite the fact the UK used to have a big fishing fleet and we're surrounded by water. As a generality, the fish selection is very poor in the UK. I know when my wife came to UK, she was very disappointed in the fish, and there's only one or two restaurants where the fish is to her liking. Then the other thing, of course, is the choices. In a European or UK supermarket, you get a much greater choice of foods and varieties. The only thing that seems to be a vast range of varieties of food in a Filipino supermarket is rice, tin tuna, tin spam and corned beef. And of course the potato selection is virtually non-existent in a Filipino supermarket, whereas in the UK you'd have an whole aisle of potatoes. But of course the choice of rice would be virtually non-existent in a UK supermarket, whereas the rice section is a major feature in a Filipino supermarket. I like Filipino food. It's very good, and there's lots of nice Western type restaurants in the big cities as well. And of course there's quite a lot of Chinese restaurants. Although of course the big difference is in that if you were in Europe, a Chinese restaurant would be owned by Chinese people and have Chinese people working in it, whereas in the Philippines, a Chinese restaurant at the best would have Filipino Chinese owners. When I'm in the Philippines, majority of the food I eat is Filipino for a number of reasons. Obviously, the choice of beef or steak is poor in the Philippines because cows don't thrive in hot temperature, and you don't see sheep in the Philippines, so lamb has to be imported and is a bit of a rarity. But in the Philippines, the pork is outstanding, so I like the pork dishes. I like pork adobo. I like crispy pata, which is a Filipino dish, and then a Filipino Chinese dish, patatim with steamed bun. We like that. The fish is absolutely wonderful with some nice fish dishes, and then of course the prawns are so much bigger than UK prawns, and the king prawns wonderful. So the prawns is good, the chicken dishes are good, the pork dishes are good, and the fish dishes are good. So there's plenty of choice for food. I like Filipino food. We like the Chinese food, which is sort of a bit Filipino Chinese really. It's not the Chinese food you'd find, say, in Singapore, Malaysia, or indeed Taiwan or China, of course. But the Chinese food is very good here, and there's some very good Italian restaurants here, and then there is a few fine dining restaurants as well, usually run by expats. My first impressions of the Philippines are all good. The only thing you have to get used to in the Philippines is that the menus are aspirational. In other words, other than if you're in a 5-star hotel, and sometimes even there, just because something's on the menu doesn't mean to say they're going to have it. So if you order something, it is not uncommon to say unavailable, sir. So that's a bit irritating, is the unavailable, sir. The other thing about the Philippines is that, whether it's the Spanish influence, is that timekeeping is not very good in the Philippines. So you have this concept of Filipino time. So don't expect a bus or a train or a plane to leave on time. Invariably, it will leave late. And if you're meeting somebody, then very often they will be late. To be fair to my wife, she's always on time and very, very rarely late. It doesn't affect me now because I think my body's got used to the bites. But when you first come to the Philippines, the mosquitoes think fresh meat, and they're waiting for you in droves at the airport. So if you're an expat and you're coming to the Philippines for the first time, at least pack insect repellent and spray the insect repellent on yourself while you're waiting at immigration, if it's possible. So as I say, after a few years in the Philippines, I don't get bitten like I used to, and I don't get the reactions. I probably get bitten, but I just don't get the reactions to it. I've got immune to it. But when you first come to the Philippines, be prepared to be bitten. Well, thank you everybody for listening to my first impressions of the Philippines. The vast majority of my first impressions of the Philippines were good. So if you're welcoming an expat to the Philippines, you can tell him all the good things about the Philippines and warn him about the occasional downsides of the Philippines. If you're expat coming to the Philippines, especially to meet a Filipina, then you can expect the vast majority of your time here will be very good. Remember, it's more fun in the Philippines. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you for subscribing to the Morley Journey. I look forward to speaking to you again. Bye-bye from me. God bless.